Most people picture Vikings in exactly the same way. They are huge, dirty, bearded men who reek of mead, blood, and unwashed bodies. For decades, Hollywood has fed us the image of savages who slept in the mud. It sounds quite logical for the harsh and brutal Middle Ages, doesn't it? But historical sources point to a completely different, almost shocking reality. In fact, the Northern Sea Warriors were the most clean-living people in Europe at the time. English monks wrote horrified chronicles about these strange and frightening habits. The secret to the Scandinavians' success with local women lay not in dark magic. They simply washed regularly, combed their hair, and changed their underwear frequently. By the standards of enlightened 9th century Europe, this was considered an absolute, unthinkable perversion. In this video, we'll take a detailed look at the daily hygiene of the rugged Northerners. You'll learn why the Vikings' cleanliness frightened their enemies even more than their sharpened axes. The Roman Empire once prided itself on its luxurious baths and sophisticated water supply system. But after its fall, civilized Europe plunged into a veritable era of unsanitary conditions. European doctors claimed in all seriousness that hot water opened the pores. Through these pores, deadly diseases and poisonous vapors penetrated the body. Therefore, washing was considered not just harmful, but literally life-threatening. And then, into this unwashed world, people from the icy north suddenly intruded. Instead of regular washing, people in the early Middle Ages preferred to use dry cleaning of clothes and strong aromatic oils. It was believed that a thick layer of natural dirt on the skin protected a person from the harmful effects of the external environment. Even among the nobility and royal families, regular visits to the bathhouse were seen as a sign of effeminacy or sinfulness. Bathing was a rare exception, and most people spent their entire lives in the same outfit without washing it. As a result, skin diseases spread throughout Europe and were considered perfectly normal. The locals of the English kingdoms expected to see real monsters from terrifying pagan legends. They prepared to meet savages clad in animal skins, caked with years of dirt, blood, and soot. But tall, neatly trimmed warriors in clean, brightly colored clothes disembarked from the ships that had docked. This caused the Anglo-Saxons intense cognitive dissonance and an incredible culture shock. The enemy did not look at all like the classic dirty barbarian, which completely shattered all familiar stereotypes. Such unusual cleanliness aroused deep suspicion among the locals and even seemed like a diabolical military ruse. The low Christian priests sincerely believed that the pagans were using witchcraft to blind them with their outward attractiveness. The strangers' neat appearance frightened the superstitious Europeans far more than their fearsome weapons. People couldn't understand how sea raiders could look so well groomed after long weeks on the open sea. This led the locals to invent myths about the supernatural nature of the northern conquerors. Imagine a typical Anglo-Saxon peasant of that difficult time. He took a bath perhaps once or twice in his life. Usually this solemn event occurred at his birth and perhaps before his own wedding. To him, the strong smell of an unwashed body was the natural scent of a devout Christian. Now imagine his reaction to a whole crowd of blonde men smelling of wild grasses. It was not merely fear of sharp weapons, but a deep fear of an unknown way of life. Europeans were accustomed to living in cramped, poorly ventilated dwellings alongside their livestock. Water was used exclusively for drinking or cooking, but never for personal hygiene. Clothing was often passed down from parents to children and went years without seeing soap. Against this bleak backdrop, the northern newcomers seemed like beings from a completely different planet. Their attire sparkled in the sun, and their hair was meticulously styled according to the latest fashion of the time. This cultural divide created an insurmountable chasm between the two worlds. The Scandinavians, however, approached matters of cleanliness with astonishing coldness and practicality. In their harsh northern climate, any skin infection could very quickly lead to a painful death. If you didn't wash off sweat and road grime in time, even the slightest scratch would instantly become infected. On a long military campaign, losing an experienced warrior to a simple blood infection was an unthinkable luxury. Therefore, hygiene became a matter of basic physical survival for them, not a whim of aesthetics. Modern medicine fully confirms this simple and harsh historical logic. Archaeologists began actively excavating ancient Viking settlements and made a surprising discovery. In the burial sites, they found not only rusty swords, broken shields, or heavy battle axes. A significant portion of the finds consisted of miniature items strikingly similar to modern cosmetic kits. At first, historians could hardly believe their own eyes or the official reports from their colleagues. It turned out that every self-respecting Viking always carried a special hygiene kit on his belt. It sounds crazy, but these fierce northern raiders were literally obsessed with their daily grooming routines. These personal kits included intricately crafted bone combs, sharp tweezers, and even special spoons for cleaning ears. Artisans carved them from reindeer antlers and decorated them with intricate geometric patterns. The fact that even a common warrior possessed such a kit suggests that personal hygiene was part of mainstream culture. Cleaning one's ears and trimming one's nails was considered a mandatory morning ritual before starting any task. To Europeans, who went years without brushing their teeth or trimming their nails, such implements seemed like strange tools. Let's compare this with the behavior of their European contemporaries on the mainland. Charlemagne, the powerful emperor of the West, forced his courtiers to bathe in the thermal springs of Aachen. But this was more of a striking exception, merely confirming the general rule of filthy Europe. Most kings and dukes of that time smelled just as bad as their own stable hands. The Vikings, however, considered a dirty and unkempt body a clear sign of a slave or a seriously ill person. A free man in Scandinavian society was simply obliged to obsessively monitor his appearance. Medieval English chroniclers bitterly noted another serious problem related to the newcomer's cleanliness. The chronicles of the old abbots explicitly state that the Vikings, thanks to their neatness, easily won the hearts of local women. They regularly combed their hair, changed their undergarments, and held a full-fledged bath day every Saturday. Anglo-Saxon wives and daughters often chose the clean Scandinavians over their unkempt fellow tribesmen. This provoked intense fury among the local men, who lost the competition for love without firing a single shot. In Norse mythology, cleanliness also held a place of honor and importance. The gods of Asgard bathed regularly and strictly demanded the same of mere mortals. If you sincerely wanted to enter the bright Valhalla after death, you had to die absolutely clean. The Valkyries could simply ignore a dirty and unkempt warrior on the field of a brutal battle. Religion dictated the rules of personal hygiene a full 1,000 years before the official emergence of microbiology. Modern doctors would call this an excellent method of mass prevention against dangerous epidemics. The most interesting details lie in their remarkable daily routines. They didn't just rinse off in passing in icy forest streams, as one might think. The Scandinavians built special wooden saunas with large hot stones and thick steam. These were full-fledged saunas where rugged warriors thoroughly cleansed their bodies and minds. After a grueling sea voyage or exhausting work, such a procedure quickly restored tired muscles. Modern professional athletes use similar saunas for exactly the same effective muscle regeneration. In these wooden saunas, the Vikings regularly used a special soap that they made themselves. Moreover, their homemade soap was not just a cleanser, but a true chemical bleach. They added a special wood lye to the recipe, which made their coarse beards even lighter. Being a bright, dazzling blonde was considered a sign of high social status and incredible beauty. That's why these fierce warriors literally bleached their hair using this caustic homemade chemical. Today's elite barbershops could learn a lot from these medieval masters, and so this gleaming giant, smelling of lye and fresh herbs, steps onto the English shore. His deadly weapons are perfectly polished, his beard is combed, and his clothes have been carefully washed in hot water. Anglo-Saxon soldiers gazed upon this unprecedented splendor with genuine animalistic mystical horror. It seemed to them that they were facing not humans at all, but immortal supernatural beings. The psychological impact of such impeccable appearance broke the will of the frightened enemy even before the battle began. The Vikings won battles even before they drew their deadly heavy swords. In the modern world, we're used to taking a quick shower every day before work. To a medieval person, this would have sounded like a diagnosis of a severe mental disorder. But the Scandinavians had their own strict schedule, which was strictly observed for centuries. Every Saturday, they set aside all their affairs for the sake of a most important water ritual. This day was called Logadagar in Old Norse, which translates as Bath Day. And this is no linguistic coincidence, but a deeply rooted social tradition. In the Icelandic language, this amusing word has survived to this day completely unchanged. In other words, an entire nation named a day of the week after the regular washing of the body. Consider this fact from a global historical perspective. While Europeans named the days after planets and Roman gods, the Vikings celebrated hygiene. Saturday bathing was so important that they would even interrupt a military campaign for it. Missing Bath Day was considered an incredible disgrace for any free Scandinavian. The bathing procedure itself was a complex, multi-step, and lengthy process. No one simply jumped into cold water to get it over with as quickly as possible. First, the Vikings heated stones in a fire until they were red hot, almost glowing. Then these stones were carried into a small, enclosed room and doused generously with water. Thick, hot steam formed, causing the body to sweat profusely. Modern physiology confirms that this is the best way to cleanse deeply clogged pores. After the steam room, stiff brushes made of natural pig or horse bristles came into play. Warriors literally scraped their skin, removing dead cells and ingrained dirt. My own skin starts to ache just thinking about this brutal procedure. But for people who wore heavy woolen clothing, it was an absolute necessity. Wool keeps you warm, but it also actively traps acrid sweat and sebum. If this layer isn't scraped off regularly, parasites would take hold in a matter of cold days. And here we come to yet another incredibly practical reason for constant washing. We're talking about the common lice and fleas that mercilessly terrorized the entire Middle Ages. In European stone castles, these insects were an absolutely normal occurrence, even among kings. The Vikings, however, could not stand uninvited guests on their powerful, well-trained bodies. Hot steam and vigorous scrubbing effectively destroyed both the parasites themselves and their larvae. The ancient Scandinavians invented disinfection long before scientists even saw the first microbes. Interestingly, the legal right to use the bathhouse was not limited to the incredibly wealthy and noble jarls. Ordinary free peasants and artisans also observed the Saturday ritual of purification. The bathhouse was often a separate, substantial building on the grounds of every large Scandinavian farmstead. This place was considered neutral territory, where it was strictly forbidden to draw any weapon. Leaving a sword at the door was unheard of in the paranoid Viking era, but A sincere respect for cleanliness proved far stronger than the fear of a sudden attack. Hot water was also excellent for treating aching battle wounds and minor household cuts. After intense training or actual combat, the warrior's muscles would become severely lactic acid clogged. The high temperature in the steam room quickly accelerated blood flow and relieved painful muscle spasms. Today, sports trainers call this thermal recovery after peak physical exertion. The Vikings simply called it Saturday and took great pleasure in the recovery process. Their bodies were their primary tools of the trade, requiring impeccable maintenance. But what to do if the army is on a long, grueling sea voyage? It is impossible to build a sauna or light a large fire for stones on a wooden dracker. Nevertheless, even on the open sea, the Norse managed to maintain strict basic hygiene. They washed themselves with cold, salty seawater and thoroughly wiped their bodies with a damp, coarse cloth. Sea salt acted as a mild, natural antiseptic, preventing the development of skin infections. It was a harsh but surprisingly effective medical solution for harsh combat conditions. When the fleet finally landed on the shores of England or France, the real fun began. The first thing the Vikings did was search for fresh water, and not just for drinking. They washed their clothes en masse and set up makeshift washing stations right on the open shore. Local sentries watched in horror as the fierce armed invaders splashed about in the river. Instead of looting immediately, these strange people scrubbed themselves until they shone. Such behavior did not fit into any known military tactics of the time. As a result, the English armies did not face an exhausted, foul-smelling enemy. Standing before them in tight formation were fresh, alert, and well-rested giants with combed beards. A clean body signified a healthy fighting spirit and 100% readiness for a prolonged battle. The Vikings turned ordinary personal hygiene into a real strategic advantage on the battlefield. They easily won the war of endurance largely thanks to their unconventional bathing habits. This is a documented historical fact that is still very hard to believe. If you ask an archaeologist what item is most commonly found in Scandinavian graves, the answer will surprise you. It is not a heavy battle axe, not a long spear, and not even a gold wedding ring. The absolute leader among historical finds is the ordinary bone hair comb. The Vikings carefully took this small object with them even into the distant afterlife. Combs were not just a piece of bone, but true works of delicate craftsmanship. They were richly decorated with intricate carvings, magical runic inscriptions, and beautiful geometric patterns. Making a good comb in the harsh 9th century was an incredibly difficult and painstaking task. The craftsmen had to spend hours carving perfect teeth from the dense antler of a red deer or the rare tusk of a walrus. One wrong move with a sharp knife, and all the craftsman's work over many days was instantly ruined. It sounds tedious, but in reality, it was true medieval microengineering that required immense patience. To create a single such item, several bone plates had to be joined together using tiny bronze rivets. Due to this complex production technology, a high-quality tool was very expensive. Viking horn combs were so durable that many of them have survived to this day in damp soil. You could easily and comfortably use them even today, first thing in the morning. Why then did these rugged, battle-hardened warriors need to comb their hair so often and so meticulously? The answer lies in the ancient Scandinavians' special, almost sacred regard for their lush hair and beards. Long, well-groomed hair was considered the primary visual sign of a free man and a full-fledged member of society. According to the laws of that time, only free men had the legal right to grow their hair past their shoulders. Slaves and prisoners of war usually had their heads shaved or cut very short to immediately and visibly demonstrate their low social status. forcibly cutting a free man's hair was considered a grave insult, one that could only be washed away with the offender's blood. For this reason, a brave Viking was ready to deal harshly with anyone who dared to touch his hair. A lush head of hair served as a kind of social passport, which they proudly wore on their own heads. The comb was used not only for aesthetic beauty, but also for basic hygiene. During long, grueling campaigns, road dust, greasy ash from campfires, and corrosive sea salt constantly got tangled in their thick hair. The closely spaced teeth of the bone tool acted as an excellent mechanical filter for cleaning the thick hair. Without this procedure, the warrior's hair would quickly turn into dirty tangles full of dangerous parasites. In addition, regular combing in the proper manner stimulated the scalp and evenly distributed sebum. This reliably protected the hair from drying out and becoming excessively brittle in the cold, biting northern wind. In the harsh Scandinavian winters, such natural protection was vital for maintaining health. Modern doctors fully endorse this ancient yet incredibly effective method of hair care. Special attention was paid to the famous Scandinavian beards, which became a true symbol of that distant era. A man's beard was strictly forbidden to stick out in all directions, resembling the appearance of a forest madman. It was very carefully trimmed with sharp scissors, constantly combed, and even braided into one or several tight plaits. A well-groomed beard signified a man's maturity and his ability to protect his large family. In fierce close combat, a braided beard also served a practical purpose, as it did not obstruct the wearer's vision at all. It also could not accidentally catch on the sharp links of chainmail or get stuck in the fastenings of leather armor. In peacetime, it clearly demonstrated its owner's high status and heroic health. To care for their mustaches and beards, craftsmen made special small combs. Scandinavian warriors proudly wore these miniature tools around their necks as valuable ornaments. Interestingly, Vikings often gave each other expensive and rare combs as a sign of sincere respect. Receiving such a valuable bone gift from a powerful ruler signified a high degree of political trust. It was a clear sign that the chieftain valued your loyalty and considered you his equal. Such gifts were carefully preserved in noble families and passed down from father to son. Young women often gave an intricately carved comb to a warrior who genuinely admired them. This was considered a very intimate and romantic gesture, much like the modern exchange of wedding rings. Wearing such a gift in plain sight showed the whole community that the man was bound to the giver by strong ties. Such touching traditions completely shatter the familiar image of soulless killing machines from modern films. English chroniclers describe this strange love of the newcomers for combing their hair with great bewilderment and obvious envy. The medieval chronicler John of Wallingford complained irritably in his writings about the strange habits of the northern invaders. According to him, the Scandinavians combed their hair every single day without fail. The monks sincerely believed that this was a cunning pagan ploy to seduce the local pious women. The Old English chronicler is quite understandable after all. The local men paled in comparison. Who needs a scruffy local baron when a well-groomed, clean, and muscular warrior from the north appears nearby? Combed locks became a true weapon of mass destruction on the secret front of love. English women overwhelmingly chose men who smelled of clean skin and wild grasses. They preferred to give their hearts to foreigners who took care to keep themselves clean every day. Modern archaeologists regularly find bone combs in special protective cases made of bronze or wood. This clearly proves that the Vikings were very afraid of accidentally breaking their fragile teeth during long expeditions. A sturdy case protected this precious personal hygiene tool better than a leather scabbard protected a battle sword. Imagine a tough Special Forces soldier who cherishes his personal comb more than a spare magazine. For a resident of the medieval North, Such careful treatment was an absolute and indisputable norm of everyday life. A comb accidentally broken on the road was considered an extremely bad omen among superstitious warriors. It foreshadowed an imminent loss of luck in battle or a serious illness in foreign lands. Moreover, losing the tool turned into a serious practical problem since finding a new craftsman on a campaign was impossible. There was even a special ritual of morning grooming before an important and bloody battle, designed to terrify the enemy. Instead of sharpening their swords, the Vikings would calmly sit in a circle in full view of the enemy. They took out their favorite combs and began to slowly and methodically tidy their hair. The warriors did this demonstratively slowly, looking straight into the eyes of the stunned enemy army. The psychological message of this pre-battle ritual was crystal clear to every terrified witness. The Scandinavians were showing that they were not at all afraid of the coming battle and were absolutely certain of the outcome. They had time to groom themselves while the Anglo-Saxons trembled with fear behind their wooden shields. It was an act of demonstrating absolute superiority over the enemy and confidence in inevitable victory. In the end, a simple piece of carved bone proved far more important than many of the advanced military technologies of the time. It saved the rugged warriors from infections, attracted the best women, and demoralized their terrified opponents. The Vikings understood perfectly well that impeccable appearance was a vital part of strict military discipline. Neglecting personal hygiene inevitably leads to a fatal loss of control in the ranks during battle. That is why they continued to comb their beards diligently in all weather conditions, even the most unbearable ones. And that is precisely what made them the most dangerous, organized, and disciplined force in all of medieval Europe. If you think that high-quality soap in the Middle Ages was a huge rarity and a luxury, you're mistaken. For the pragmatic Vikings, the production of cleaning agents was as ordinary and routine a matter as iron forging. They did not wait for rare shipments of expensive aromatic oils from the distant, warm, and wealthy south. The Northerners simply made their own soap regularly from what was always at hand in their forests. They used ordinary animal fat, carefully mixed with ash from birch or beech fires. This thermonuclear chemical mixture handled any dirt perfectly, even the most stubborn and ingrained grime. The soap-making process required exceptionally precise proportions and a true, intuitive chemical instinct from the craftsman. If too little ash was added to the cauldron, the soap simply wouldn't lather and clean dirty skin. If one overdid it with the caustic ash, the resulting bar was guaranteed to burn the hands until they were covered in terrible, bloody blisters. Through long trial and error, the Vikings found the perfect chemical balance, creating an incredibly powerful alkaline agent. Their soap was so strong that it easily washed away dried blood and thick weapon oil. In essence, they accidentally invented a medieval working equivalent of a modern, powerful industrial solvent. But the most surprising property of this soap lay in its unexpected cosmetic side effect. The high concentration of alkali acted as a powerful chemical bleach for coarse human hair. Dark-haired warriors regularly lathered their beards to artificially lighten them or turn them bright red. Being blonde in strict Scandinavian society was considered a clear sign of aristocracy and divine beauty. Therefore, these fierce warriors willingly bleached their hair with a caustic, homemade chemical paste. Today's stylists in elite beauty salons might envy their radical yet effective methods. This procedure was by no means pleasant and often caused severe irritation on rough, weather-beaten skin. The lye stung the eyes mercilessly and severely dried out the face with regular use of such an aggressive bleach. But social beauty demanded real sacrifices even in the harsh, unforgiving realities of the brutal 9th century. A bright yellow beard was a kind of personal brand that immediately set a noble Viking apart in any crowd. Enemies could see these gleaming locks from afar and instantly understood exactly who they were dealing with. It was a crucial visual marker of status, for which it was truly worth enduring painful chemical burns. In addition to bleaching, Scandinavian homemade soap brilliantly solved another critically important biological problem. It killed any skin parasites with the stunning efficiency of a modern sniper rifle. Lice simply could not physically survive in the aggressive alkaline environment that the Vikings regularly created on their bodies. While English lords frantically scratched beneath their expensive silk robes, the Northerners enjoyed perfectly clean skin. This drastically reduced the risk of a catastrophic outbreak of typhus and other dreadful diseases of that dark age. Soap was their reliable, invisible shield, which protected a vast army better than any iron chainmail. Interestingly, soap making was primarily the work of Scandinavian women in their remote farmsteads. They carefully passed down the secrets of the ideal proportions of fat and lye from generation to their daughters. A skilled, experienced soap maker was valued in Northern society no less than a skilled blacksmith or a talented armorer. Bars of finished, high-quality soap were even actively used as a valuable commodity for profitable barter. In the bustling markets of Dublin and York, the Vikings actively traded their first-class hygiene products. Their enemies hated them fiercely, but bought their high-quality cleaning products with great pleasure. In addition to aggressive alkaline soap, the Vikings used natural fragrances to improve their scent. They diligently gathered wild mint, fragrant thyme, and fresh pine needles in the dense northern forests. These aromatic herbs were generously added to hot water for washing or simply rubbed onto clean skin. As a result, the fearsome Scandinavian didn't smell of rot and sweat, but of fresh forest and pleasant smoke. Sounds like a conceptual, incredibly expensive perfume from a modern fashion boutique, doesn't it? Except they did it absolutely for free and over 1,000 years ago without any laboratories. Archaeologists regularly found wooden bowls in ancient excavations with traces of a strange, thick white coating. Chemical analysis in laboratories showed that these were the remains of ancient Scandinavian soap and animal fat. This is direct, irrefutable proof that hygiene routines were a daily practice, not a rare occasion. A warrior would wake up groggily, take a bowl, lather his face thoroughly, and only then confidently grasp his sword. For modern people, washing one's face in the morning is an automatic, boring, and completely unremarkable action. For a Viking, it was a crucial, almost sacred ritual of preparation for a new, harsh, dangerous day. Old European chronicles contain some rather amusing complaints about the smell of the Scandinavian sea raiders, but they were not complaining about a stench at all, but rather about the overly sharp, unfamiliar scent of fresh pine needles and lye. The Anglo-Saxons sincerely believed that a real, rugged man should smell of sour sweat, earth, and horses, and these strange giants smelled of mountain herbs, as if they were some pampered, wealthy southern merchants. The cognitive dissonance caused by a murderer with an axe who smelled of spring flowers literally shattered the psyche of the local inhabitants. It was so at odds with their familiar worldview that it provoked genuine panic and horror. In summary, we can safely and deservedly call the Vikings true pioneers of the medieval chemical industry. They ingeniously transformed ordinary ash and old lard into a universal, indispensable means of survival for the nation. Their soap cleansed terrible wounds, lightened hair, and saved entire settlements from horrific, deadly epidemics. Modern science confirms that lye is one of the best, most reliable antiseptics ever invented by humanity. The Scandinavians simply figured this out before the rest of Europe and ramped up mass production. And this proves once again that behind the fearsome image of the savage lay a calculating, incredibly pragmatic mind. Now let's take a closer look at the situation through the eyes of the ordinary, frightened inhabitants of the British Isles. The Vikings suddenly sailed up to their shores, brutally plundered monasteries, and took all the gold they could find. But there was one particular crime that angered the English lords far more than any material plunder. The Scandinavians were taking local women away en masse, and very often without any physical violence or coercion. English women themselves were incredibly eager to run off with the pagans to their distant, cold northern lands. And the main reason for this mass betrayal lies exclusively in the Vikings' personal hygiene. Local rulers were absolutely furious at this outrageous state of affairs. They could grit their teeth and resign themselves to the loss of chests of silver or herds of pedigree cows. But the voluntary flight of wives and daughters to pagan raiders was a painful blow to the lord's male pride. This unexpected phenomenon undermined the very unshakable foundation of the harsh patriarchal society of the early Middle Ages. The Britons simply refused to believe that their women were leaving for the enemy of their own free will. A letter from the renowned English priest John of Wallingford reveals the full essence of this astonishing historical drama. He wrote with indignation and anger that the accursed Danes had the audacious habit of bathing every Saturday. Not only that, but they regularly changed their woolen underwear and constantly, obsessively comb their hair. According to the priest, these cunning, devilish manipulations were employed specifically to seduce respectable married women. It sounds incredibly funny, but this is a real, official, historical document, not some silly internet joke. Cleanliness suddenly became a real, tangible threat to the traditional English institution of marriage at that time. Saturday bathing was an inviolable and sacred rule of life for the northern warriors. In the Scandinavian languages, Saturday is still literally translated as bath day. This wholesome tradition was strictly and scrupulously observed even during very long military campaigns. The rugged sea wolves always sought out a freshwater source to wash away the blood and grime of the past week. If there was no river nearby, they would be sure to heat water in large camping cauldrons. Try for a second to put yourself in the shoes of a medieval Anglo-Saxon woman from the harsh 9th century. Your lawful husband or fiancé bathes once a year, reeks of manure, dirt, and sour cheap ale. His clothes are teeming with biting fleas, and his hair is hopelessly tangled into a single dirty, greasy mass. And suddenly, a tall, stately blonde man with clean, literally glowing skin strides confidently into your village. He smells incredibly pleasant, of pine needles, soap, and the freshness of a cold, salty sea breeze. The choice becomes all too obvious, even if this handsome man is a dangerous, cruel foreign invader. The living conditions of English peasants at that time also left much to be desired. Most ordinary people huddled in dark huts with earthen floors where there was almost no fresh air. In winter, they slept in the same room as their livestock to preserve precious warmth in any way they could. Naturally, all the pungent odors of the barn quickly and permanently permeated their rough skin. Against this bleak backdrop, the northern newcomers, fragrant with freshness, seemed like messengers from a completely different, brighter world. The Vikings were perfectly, absolutely aware of their aesthetic advantage and made the most of it. They sewed comfortable shirts from fine linen, which felt incredibly pleasant against a clean, washed body. Unlike the Englishman's coarse, never-washed wool, linen demonstrated a concern for personal care and comfort. The Scandinavians loved bright colors, red, blue, and green, which they obtained from incredibly expensive dyes. A clean man in bright, beautiful clothing automatically attracted admiring female glances at any city market. It was the medieval equivalent of a man in a perfect, expensive suit amidst a crowd of dirty, ragged people. In those dark times, high-quality, multicolored fabrics cost a truly astronomical amount of money. Resourceful Scandinavians brought back exotic silks and bright dyes from their travels to the Far East. The rich red of a long cloak immediately identified a successful, wealthy, and self-assured warrior. They were masters at combining colors, adorning collars and sleeves with intricate silver or silk embroidery. Such an incredibly stylish appearance disarmed simple English girls far more quickly than the threat of force. In addition, the Vikings used tools that were considered an excessive, unnecessary luxury in the rest of Europe. Tiny silver spoons of a very strange, curved shape often hung from their wide leather belts. They looked like women's jewelry, but in fact, they were special ear picks for cleaning ears. Yes, these incredibly brutal warriors regularly and very thoroughly cleaned out the earwax that had accumulated. They also constantly carried miniature forged tweezers to pluck excess facial hair. Their personal grooming kits were more extensive than the toiletries of many modern, well-groomed European men. These remarkable hygiene items were often crafted with incredible skill and a great love for detail. Artisans cast them from ringing bronze or pure silver, lavishly decorating them with intricate Scandinavian patterns. Warriors wore these sets with undisguised pride in the most prominent place as a symbol of their culture. Losing a beloved earspoon or tweezers on a campaign was considered a great personal misfortune for a Norse man. Such reverence for simple pieces of metal left Europeans in a state of deep, sincere bewilderment. Englishmen tried clumsily to counter this scourge through rather absurd bureaucratic measures. Instead of simply starting to wash properly, they nervously drafted laws against the Scandinavian fashion. The church strictly forbade local young men, under threat of punishment, from cutting their hair in the Danish style and shaving the backs of their heads. But these silly bans didn't work at all, and the trend of clean-shaven Vikings only rapidly gained popularity. And the locals eventually began secretly copying their style in an attempt to win back the favor of women. It's amusing that these brutal invaders brought not only destruction to the islands, but also basic hygiene. However, impeccable cleanliness played into the Scandinavians' hands, not only in secret love affairs. During important diplomatic negotiations, their impeccable appearance completely overwhelmed their opponents psychologically. When a jarl, clean and gleaming with polished metal and bright fabrics, entered the hall, he was absolutely dominant. The dirty, foul-smelling local barons instinctively felt incredibly insecure in the presence of such guests. In modern sociology, this is called the halo effect. Beautiful people subconsciously seem stronger and smarter to us. The Vikings unconsciously, yet brilliantly, exploited this cognitive bias to secure better peace terms. Fear of the Vikings was multiplied many times over by their frightening, almost alien, otherworldly appearance. For a devout Christian of that time, dirt symbolized the transience of the body and complete humility before the Almighty. Excessive, constant concern for the flesh was considered a terrible sin of pride and a devilish, insidious temptation. Therefore, the pagans, radiant with absolute purity, were perceived as true servants of the underworld in human flesh. How could an ordinary person be so clean unless he was using some powerful black magic? This mystical, clinging fear caused entire garrisons to surrender even before an active military assault began. The Scandinavians themselves openly and maliciously mocked the monstrous uncleanliness of their southern European neighbors. Their ancient sagas sometimes contain highly contemptuous, derisive references to the stinking Southerners. A true Viking could stoically endure the bitter cold, hunger, and the incredible pain of a hack wound. But sharing a bed or a table with an unwashed person was physically unbearable for him. They sincerely, with all their hearts, could not understand why people with such vast resources lived in filth. The difference in everyday mentality was far deeper than the difference in religions or spoken languages. History eventually set everything straight, forever debunking those old, silly Hollywood myths. The brutal barbarians from the cold north unexpectedly turned out to be the chief ambassadors of cleanliness in the Dark Ages. Their daily habits saved thousands of lives from infection and forever changed the demographics of entire regions. English women simply made a purely pragmatic choice in favor of hot soap and a bone comb. And the next time you step into the shower, remember these rugged folks with respect. They knew a thing or two about hygiene a full 1,000 years before it became mainstream. The Viking Age ended long ago, leaving behind a vast array of legends and terrifying tales. For a long time, we naively believed in the image of the unwashed savage, mindlessly destroying everything in his path. But modern science and archaeology are persistent. They are slowly revealing the true, astonishing historical reality to us. These people were incredibly complex, calculating, pragmatic, and meticulous when it came to their own survival. Their approach to health, the body, and appearance was centuries ahead of its time, and it was precisely this attention to small, everyday details that made them great conquerors and fearless pioneers. Victory does not go to the army that simply shouts the loudest and swings a heavy axe the most furiously. Victory goes exclusively to those who skillfully avoid dysentery, protect their wounds from rotting, and sleep free of parasites. The Vikings proved in practice that hot steam and a bar of alkaline soap are also incredibly effective weapons. Today, we take clean tap water and toothbrushes for granted as something completely natural. But for the rugged men of the 9th century, these were the most powerful tools for dominating an entire vast continent. History always turns out to be more interesting, complex, and paradoxical than any primitive stereotypes invented for the movies.